I already kind of alluded to DEXA, and that's the one that I've gotten recently. Historically, I've had this done about 4 years ago when I was getting ready for a show, but I was much heavier. I was 135, but like getting on stage to compete in both bikini and wellness. So it was cool being able to compare because like in their database, they were able to pull those up and be like, oh, side by side, this is like, yeah, this is incredible. Here are the changes you've made in 4 years, even though it's not like it was a linear progression. So DEXA, it is a low dose X-ray, and it passes through your body to differentiate bone, fat, and lean mass in specific regions. So this is where it's really exciting for individuals who, let's say, need to add more muscle to like either the top or the bottom, and you want to maintain in the other group. If it's something that like your upper body's fully developed and like you don't need any more upper body, but you need to add a lot of tissue in the lower body, well, then you can keep an eye on the upper body while seeing the lower body progress, systematically. But oftentimes, people will say that this is the gold standard, that the accuracy is really high. Now, I'll say like, yes, like generally this is the one that I would say is probably more accurate compared to the other methods. There's typically a margin of error around 2%, even if conditions are constant. And really what I need you to like keep in mind is that the machine calibration can vary between facilities. So, I mean, like it might actually be more of a pain in the dick to be like, hey, can I use the same machine I used last time if like there's only 2 rooms? Let's say you book an appointment, because that's kind of what you have to do for DEXA is you have to book an appointment. They call you in, they're like, hey, which room do you want? Small day-to-day changes. If you do this fed, if you do it fasted, or if hydration status changes, if you don't go to the bathroom as much, if you are not retaining as much fluid, if you're not in true balance, like from an electrolyte standpoint. Doing it fasted is recommended for consistency. Doing it the same time of day. I'll tell you, I have a client who like they go and do DEXAs after the same meal every day and the same amount of fluid and after a cardio session. And I very much wish they would just go like first thing on the way to the gym before eating. But truly, I would say like the big things here, like why this can be a benefit is it does break down like body fat percentage to lean body mass by region. So that shows you exactly where muscle is being built, where fat is accruing or where it's dropping. And if you have issues in terms of past injuries or feel like you have imbalances, top to bottom, like I said before, you can quantify this in I would say, a pretty accurate way. Now, many facilities, they're also going to give you a resting metabolic rate estimate. Keep in mind that this is truly like just an estimate. There's so many formulas you can use. And I think they give you 4 different ones that are like potentiations of your resting metabolic rate based on different formulas. Now, this can really help you dial in your nutrition. And I would say not necessarily in the case that like you want to go get a DEXA and then be told like here are the calories exactly the hit to hit, but rather you can extrapolate that information and get a better sense of the kind of deficit that you're creating, which I think is very beneficial. I felt like mine was pretty accurate. Like it gave me a range at 147 at 5'4", 1,500 to 1,700. That works for me. I'm going to lean more towards the 1,500. I wouldn't go as far to say 1,700 is truly a, like I would say like maybe that's closer to a maintenance, but I would be like kind of dicey about activity levels and how this is going to change day to day. I felt like Jordan's was really accurate too. He is really dense. He's like 190 pounds. And I mean, like we've seen in his body when he's been in a build, when he's been in a fat loss phase, it's been hard for him to gain weight, even at 3,500 calories, which is pretty much what we were able to see with the resting metabolic rate that the DEXA spit out, is that his like resting metabolic is anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000. So you layer that on top of like really high training performance and then just the recovery that's needed. I think it gives you a pretty accurate sense. Now, if budget or accessibility, if this is not an issue, I think DEXA could very well be something that you implement. I wouldn't necessarily say you need to do it weekly. I think data will get kind of muddied. And I would say specifically for females, we need to time this roughly the same time of our cycles. So if you are getting it done when you're ovulating, that's generally the time I would get it done the next month. If you're getting it done in the follicular versus the luteal, I think it's important to consider this, or even if you're on your period. So when I got mine done, I was 147, and I started my period after a missed month entirely. And just to be honest, like, sorry, I was really backed up. I hadn't gone to the bathroom even that morning. Like I was like, yeah, whatever, appointment's at 8, like not really a lot I can do at this point. Overnight, I started my period, was able to use the bathroom, and like my weight came down the next day. It was like 143.8. So keep in mind, like my DEXA was it spit out 17% at 147, but is that truly accurate? Probably not 100%. It's hard to say. It's hard to say if it was equating for some of that GI weight or even fluid retention as fat or muscle. But I would say, like, generally, if you're noticing big swings the day before or the day after, it's not to say that that DEXA isn't useful or can't be helpful in just understanding your composition. But I would definitely make note of what variances or what aspects would potentially affect said weigh-in, and that should be included. It's like, did you have a really big dinner the night before and maybe like your transit time is not as fast? Are you the week before your period and like naturally you just have that lower abdomen bloat and like things are a little more inflamed? Did you just have a crazy workout the day before? Which that was also another thing before the DEXA. I had a great workout that session, and some people are like, well, shouldn't you avoid training prior to getting it scanned? Prior to getting scanned? And realistically, like, you can, but it's just like with labs. Like I generally don't want to impede on someone's training cycle. And if we can avoid that entirely, that's likely what I'm going to recommend they do, unless there is true reason, unless we're like using a DEXA for like osteopenia, or in the case we're getting labs done and we're like trying to look at liver enzymes in their most accurate sense. If they're slightly elevated, like I'm talking very marginal elevations, and we can correlate that, or I guess, yeah, make that correlation to training. That could explain some of it, but that's a different conversation. But that kind of brings me to the next one, which is skin fold sites. Calipers. Now all this is pinching, like physically pinching subcutaneous fat at specific sites and plugging them into formulas. Now, I'm going to say I don't use the formulas. I just get the sum of the millimeters at different sites that I care about. So for me, I do calipers every single week. I've done them like for about 2 years, and not every single week, but like every check-in, like it's something that I take when I take my measurements, which is the circumference. I take my calipers, which I use an analog, like spring-loaded measurement tool, which I really like. I think it's much more accurate than using an electronic one where you have to like pinch it together. And I think this in itself is much more accurate than having a trained personal trainer, someone who is trained in doing calipers, only because you're going to see that there is variance with the person actually testing and pinching. And if like with the tool I use, like it's like $20, there's a pretty big discrepancy depending on how much I actually pinch from my stomach. So I mean, like, this is where I've had, like, in the past, I've had boyfriends like, oh yeah, here, you do this for me because it's a little bit easier. But in reality, they might not be pinching to the same degree that I am. They might be pinching harder. They might be pulling harder. It also is something that can be largely affected by fluid status. So whenever I, have really hard sessions, I know that if I take my calipers the next day, largely specific to the muscle group that I worked. So if I worked my lower body, my glutes, my legs, they're going to be more inflamed. There's going to be more water on my frame, and that can manifest as more pinchable fat. So I'll say that this is one that I am a fan of, but not necessarily to the extent that I'm plugging it in to get a percentage, but rather I'm just getting like a gross sum of the pinchable fat in millimeters. So for me, I do serratus, belly button, lower back, upper glute, lower glute. And I actually do multiple points on my legs because that's where I carry a lot of my fat. And I do the inside, like my adductor. I do upper where my adductor is, where I guess like the thickest, I should say that the thickest part of my adductor is, like the widest part. I also do the circumference there. So I'm measuring both size in diameter not really diameter, circumference, but size, as well as pinchable fat, just to get an idea of if that's growing. Same thing with mid thigh. And then I carry a lot of fat right around my knees because I have negative quads, or at least at one point I did, maybe not so much now. And it's nice because now I can get this collective idea of if weight's going up, if it's going down, where it's coming from. So again, just to stress this, if you're going to do it at a gym or have someone else do it, or you're going to do it yourself and follow a 6-point read, because it's essentially you're using a formula that has anywhere from 3 to 11 points. And then it's spitting out a percentage. Now, this isn't going to measure visceral fat, which is the fat kind of in and around in your organs, which the DEXA will. So I thought that was helpful too, because especially if we're looking at waist size, if you're someone who's hey, I think that this is mostly fat and not actually bloat. I think I'm just a little squishier, a little fatter in areas that are non-subcutaneous. This would help you differentiate that. But I think largely calipers alongside DEXA, that could be a really nice harmonious blend of generally measuring the areas that fat is accumulating or coming off of. But the skill of the technician is huge. If you are working with someone, I would work with the same person if you're going to a facility or if you're going to your gym and then you have a single trainer. Don't rotate trainers. I've done that before with calipers, and that just adds another layer to this. Site selection needs to be consistent each and every time. So I have little moles or birthmarks or just general notations around on my belly button, there are 4 quadrants. I'm going to use the upper right side because that is what I've been using thus far. So if I switch to a side of my body that I carry more fat, or I don't know, the interesting thing is on the DEXA, I was able to see I've injured my right leg, I've rehabbed it, and now it has more muscle and less fat. Where's my left leg? Less muscle, more fat, but they weigh almost the same. It's just different structural composition. So that would be something to consider in the case you're doing calipers, if you're pinching different parts of, let's say, your left leg versus your right leg, and you're like me, where you have that kind of asymmetry. But what I like about the calipers is it's low cost. You can do it weekly or monthly. A lot of my athletes, they want to do it, and they kind of run into very common issues with not having a good landing site, not knowing what changes they should be seeing. So then they think they're doing it wrong. So then they take pinches until they see a difference, which I don't recommend. But I think if you're a competitor, you can note your personal pinch readings at your fattest and at your leanest. And I've done this at the start of my prep in 22. I don't think I did it before then, but it was really enlightening to see how much I shrunk down to, and then how much I got up to in my off seasons. And now being back in prep, having done a few fat loss phases, I can kind of trend that and be okay, so last summer I didn't get stage lean, but I got pretty close. And then here are the circumferences, pairing that with measurements that increased.